Good afternoon, Oakstone. Happy Sabbath to everyone. It's really nice to be here with all y'all, and glad we can be here together. I'm keyed up this morning. We went to leave our house, and we're like, why is this guy? There's some random dude at the end of our driveway. And our gate was open because we were getting ready to leave. We're like, well, we don't really want to leave the house when there's some stranger here. And anyway, we went to the end of the driveway, and there was a truck we couldn't see just out of view. And it was going up in flames. So we hadn't seen the smoke yet. We hadn't seen any of that, but there was a truck completely going up in flames. So we did our best to help out with, trying to extinguish the fire. But that has me all keyed up. I think Liz drove on the way here, and it was like the adrenaline just kind of didn't quite wear off. And I think we're getting there. So I'm about as excited as anyone you'll ever hear talk to you about this topic today, I think. What if I told you that there is a thing you can do? This can sound like an infomercial. What if I told you there's a single thing, one weird trick that you can do that will draw you nearer to God? Let's do it, right? Let's do it. Everyone in? It's a bit of a trick question. Everyone's in. I have a photographic memory, and I remembered who all raised their hands. I'm just kidding. I don't. Wish I did. But it's really easy. This is an amazing practice that will draw us nearer to God. It's so easy to do. And yet it's not. And it's so much not that we don't like it. We don't like it very much. It's one of the practices of the Christian that we're supposed to have in our walk. It's one of the tools we have in our belt. And it's something I've talked to about before. It's been probably 2 or 3 years since we topic, but it's one of those sort of ones that needs to be covered with some sort of persistency every few years, I think. Today, my speaking goal is kind of a tall order. I want to convince all of you guys and gals to have a new view towards fasting. Right? So everyone raised their hand, kind of, right? So they said, we're in. They said it's a bit of a trick question, but I want to talk today about maybe considering it from a bit of a different perspective. Me too, because I don't like it. Being honest, I don't really enjoy it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about that. We are almost 2 months away from the fall holy day. We are almost exactly 2 months away from the Day of Atonement specifically, but the fall holy day season is rapidly approaching us with the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, the 8th day. And we'll get in more into, as we approach those days, the meanings behind them and all that. But let's just be turning to Leviticus 23 to start with. Leviticus 23 and verse 26. Like I said, my goal today is hopefully to get you to take a different view towards fasting, to consider it from a different perspective, to see it for what it represents and what it can do for us. Leviticus 23 and verse 26. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, and also the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. You shall do no work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement, to make your atonement for you before Yahweh your God. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all of your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict your souls on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening you shall celebrate your Sabbath. 3 times it's mentioned in here that you shall afflict your souls. That's kind of an important thing. That's like one of the primary observances, at least in this portion of Scripture, as to how we're told to observe the Day of Atonement. So real quickly, we just want to go through what is the biblical definition of fasting. I think these days, we can use fast in lots of terms. I'm taking a technology fast. I'm taking a fast from my cell phone. Taking a fast from alcohol. You fill in the gap, and there's nothing wrong with these. These are really good things to do, but they have different purposes. You may be taking a fast from alcohol to allow your liver cells to regenerate, to be able to have a clearer mind. You might be taking a fast from Facebook to have a clearer mind. You might be doing all these different types of fasts, and they have their purposes and they're good things. But from the biblical perspective, the Bible, if you look up, afflicting of soul, fasting, etc., what you'll find is typically no food. And you could make the argument no food and no water. So it kind of can go either way on that. There may be more precision to that as you delve down, but for now, let's just say that it means no food and probably no food and water. It can be for any amount of time, a day, 3 weeks, a week, 40 days. That's what we see fasts occurring throughout the Bible. And there's different types of fasts you can do. There's like the Daniel fast. And those aren't, well, that's not really prescribed in the Bible as a thing. It's something that we see the characters going in and doing. You see Daniel doing this fast from all the items from the king's table in order to accomplish a purpose, which is to demonstrate, one, his obedience to God's, what he's been commanded, but two, to demonstrate to the king that something, that God's laws actually work. And that you see, once Daniel has done his fast, you see the results, and it all works really well. For the purpose of this, I'm less really concerned with the type of fast here, but I want to get us into the understanding and like the why of it. If we can understand the why behind the fasting, I think we'll come to a different appreciation of it. Now, myself, I've never really understood intellectually what's the deal? Why is this the tool that we are given on atonement? Or the prescription of how to observe it? Or why is this like a tool in our tool belt for faith? They always say, Bible study, fasting, prayer. Okay, why? Yes, it's a humbling of ourselves, but to what end? I can speak for myself. I get oftentimes when I'm sick, I feel like oftentimes very much of the same purposes can be accomplished as going without food. I think we may delve into that later, we may not, but it's certainly a humbling of ourselves, but to what end and why? And is it like a hunger strike? Is it like a hunger strike to get what we want? God, I'm not going to eat anything until I get this thing, or I understand your will, or until you tell me what it is about this. I'm just not going to eat, right? I looked up hunger strikes, and it's essentially, it relies on, because I'm like, what a dumb thing, a hunger strike, right? I don't care. Go ahead, just don't eat if you don't want. Person who wants me to do something on your behalf, just don't eat. That doesn't affect me, really. I mean, and what it does, it relies on your feeling sorry for the other person in order to get you to change your mind. That's, in its essence, what a hunger strike is. So are we doing a hunger strike? Are we somehow trying to get God to, feel sorry for us while we're not eating? And of course, it sounds absurd on its face. That's not the point, right? So it's not a hunger strike. But the question remains, why is this a thing? And why would God want us to do this or have regard for our simply not eating or not eating and drinking? Consider that when we do a fast, it's not something we go into lightly, right? So if any of you have fasted throughout the year outside of atonement, it's one of those things you almost have to plan for. You have to say, I'm gonna fast on this day, and then kind of have to notify your family and be like, I'm going to be at dinner on Tuesday or whatever, and then kind of go through the whole thing. But it's a huge disruption from our daily life and the normal order of things, the way things might go. Is it not? It is, at least for me. And we plan for it. And we begin by maybe seeking God actively, seeking his face, saying, hey, God, I'm trying to pursue you. I'm trying to seek your face by laying these things aside. And so we begin to seek his guidance. But then it becomes we go throughout the day, and maybe we're walking and doing stuff, and old habits set in. I'm sure each of you has had an instance in your life, if you fasted, where before you know it, you're walking into the kitchen and you open up the fridge and you have food in your mouth, and it's in your, I'm supposed to be fasting. That's happened to me. I was fasting one day, and I was in the garden, and there was a blueberry shrub. I was like, hey, a blueberry, and I'm eating it. And before I know it, now I'm like, I was doing a fast. So should I throw in the towel? If we accidentally do that, do we throw in the towel? No, we move on, and we understand that what it is we've done is we've made a mistake, and we continue going. We can get distracted about things with our daily life. When we slipped up, I could have gone one way. I could have called the whole thing off and be like, I biffed the fast. We're gonna call a mulligan on that one. We'll do it another day. Or we could have said, I messed up, and we move on, right? We sorry, God. The fast, it's not a sin if it was done out of, accidentally, but sorry, God, and then we pick up and we continue the fast, right? Why am I going into this? Because in this way, fasting essentially mirrors the Christian walk. You start with saying, I'm going to go and do this thing. I'm going to turn my life over to the Lord. I'm going to yield to Jesus as Lord of my life. I'm going to ask for forgiveness for Lord. I'm going to take the exchange of Jesus' sacrifice and the righteousness that he imparts to me, and I'm going to plan to essentially upend my life, the way I had been going, and upend my life and say, I'm going to go a new way. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to notify my family, say, hey, I'm doing something different now. I'm following the Lord. And then as you go and you begin, it starts off maybe kind of easy, and then you get throughout the day, and as the day gets going, you start to get the grumbles, and you go back maybe to old habits. Maybe you go back to old sins. You go into the fridge and you get the metaphorical snack, or you go to the garden, you get the blueberry off the bush, and you partake of the old things. Do we completely call off our walk at that point? No. We seek God, we seek his face, we seek the forgiveness that he offers us. We understand that we've slipped up, and we ask for the forgiveness. Fasting is sort of like a microcosm or a reenactment of the Christian walk. And it's not unique to fasting either, right? So you see in each year, God has us go through the holy days. He has us walk through the Passover and its rites and practices and rituals. He has us go through each holy day that he has set apart, and he has us walk through these things in order to kind of put in our muscle memory, so to speak, the things that he has laid out in his plan ahead of time and ordained from the foundation of the world. And I'm contending today that fasting, one of its benefits is that it is a thing that we can do. It's like a concentrated distillate of our Christian walk. And I'll add a little bit more to that as to why that is. Luke 9:23. Luke 9, verse 23. Then Jesus said to them all, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Jesus is saying here that daily we have to put the things of the flesh aside, to deny them, to deny ourselves of the things that we might want by default. It's a daily chore, it's a daily task. This, of course, relates to baptism in so many other aspects of the Christian walk, but in terms of fasting, it's like when we fast, we're doing our best to focus on everything that is of the Lord and to push aside and deny everything else that we might be asking of our attention, of our time, right? Let's get, I think Matthew, let me check this verse really quick. Mark 2 and verse 18. Let's go there. We're going to try to flush out the picture as we go of why this is essentially the parallel or representative of our Christian walk, or at least what our Christian walk ought to be. Mark 2, verse 18. The disciples of John and of the Pharisees were fasting. Then they came and said to him, why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. What's the implication here? The implication is that when Jesus is with you, you don't need to, well, that's not the implication. That's explicitly stated, is that when Jesus is with you, you do not need to fast. The implication is that when he's not, we would fast in order to draw nearer to him. Right? So in absence of him, we go without. We deny ourselves of the things that we want in order to press in to him, to maintain a solitary focus on him. It's not wrong to eat in and of itself. God made us with this desire for food. In fact, throughout the Bible, he gives us, it's good that man should enjoy the fruits of his labors, the food and the drink. But everything has its time and everything has its place. And when we go through this exercise of fasting, it is the simple denial of the things that we want in our body that enables us to focus in and look to him. And we'll talk a little bit more as we get into that as to why that denial is so relevant. We'll get into that just in a little bit. Our role in his absence is to pursue him and to seek him and to seek alignment with his ways. Fasting is a very, very effective means by which to do this. So if that's the case, then what is the fast that God wants? He actually talks to us about this. Isaiah 58 and verse 2. This is the fasting that pleases God. Well, we'll start in verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not, and lift up your voice like a trumpet. Tell my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways. As a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice, and they take delight in approaching God. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen? Why have we afflicted our souls, and you take no notice? Well, in fact, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure, and you exploit all your laborers. Indeed, you fast for strife and debate, and to strike with the fist of wickedness. You will not fast as you do this day to make your voice heard on high. Is it a fast I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Would you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Indeed, is this not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens? Let's just stop real quick, actually. In verse 5, it's talking about the things that they would have done during their fast, to go with this sort of ritualistic bowing down, this spreading out. They would bring out the sackcloth. They'd put on sackcloth to represent rags rather than proper clothes. They'd put ashes on themselves to essentially, mimic Job. There was probably some point to the ashes, I don't know. But to essentially humble oneself, to bring oneself down to the ground. But God says that this is not the fast I've chosen. Is this not the fast I've chosen instead? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. So basically, anything that's imprisoning someone or yourself, the fasting is to help break these, to break these bonds. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh. I'll add a phrase here. If you do these things, verse 8, then your light shall break forth like the morning. Your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of Yahweh shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and Yahweh will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. If you extend your soul, there's more. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness, if you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and strengthen your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden and a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Do you find that interesting that in verse 11, he's saying this fast that's acceptable and pleasing to the Lord, though you go without, he will fill you, satisfy your soul in the drought. He will water you like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. You're going without the physical. You're pursuing these things of God, to be humble, to do justice, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke, to take away the burdens, to take away the chains of shackles of sin, to act as God's proxy on earth, to be burdened and afflicted on behalf of others. This is the whole ministry of Jesus, kind of like in one thing. This is what God is asking us to do when we fast. This is the fast that pleases him, not the woe is me, sackcloth and ashes. It's using it to be intercessors on behalf of others, to help break the bonds, to do justice, to loose bonds of wickedness and undo heavy burdens. That can be for yourself or it can be for others. But did you notice that it says, then you will cry and he will say, here I am? In a sense, this gets God's attention because he sees you doing the things that please him, not because you're going without food. It's almost like the mechanism of it, perhaps, is that you're going without food. You're seeking God. You're seeking his ways. And as a result, the outpouring of his Spirit through you allows you to go and do these things that are essentially the sowing of fruit and the generating of fruit, things, the fruits of the Spirit. And because of that, he says, that's my son. That's my daughter. It's not a hunger strike that gets his attention. It's the doing of the things that matter to him. Working the works of Jesus, working the works of the Lord in our lives. Or we could be like the hypocrites. We could get religious about it, right? We can do like the Pharisees did in Matthew 6. You can turn with me if you want to Matthew 6, verse 16. Matthew 6, verse 16. Moreover, when you fast, Jesus is teaching how we should fast. Do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. This just I don't know, this is so funny to me. They would, I guess it takes a religious society for this to carry any merit, because I think now we would look at someone and be like, what's wrong with you? Right? But like, I guess during the time, people knew what they were doing. It was a religious practice, and so it was esteemed, I suppose, within the society. But when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Surely I say to you that they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face. Basically, do the things you normally do. Make yourself appear as though you're in your right mind, normal state, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. When we do anything, be it service, be it fasting, when we do these things as to men, or if we do them, Eric used this verse, or one I think really close to it, when he talked last week on legacy. But when we do good, are we doing it to be seen by men, or are we doing it to pursue things? I don't think many people these days fast to be seen by men. I do think, though, that we do it in order to maybe try to get God's will to bend to our will sometimes. I've done that before. Really, it should be the other thing. Is what is it we can do when we're doing this to allow our will to conform to God's will for us? And when we're doing all these things, this is where it becomes, I hope you're beginning to see how these, this fast that God ordains is the specific fast that he wants, how this becomes the, essentially the distillate microcosm of the Christian walk he wants from us. When you're walking to be humble, to do justice, to loose bonds of wickedness, to undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke to take away, to be burdened and afflicted on behalf of others. This is the Christian walk. That's like, do all those things in the right heart and mind, you'll be good with the Lord, right? Not because we earn it, but because that is the outflowing of fruit from being saved and having God's Spirit in you. God takes us to task when we fast for the wrong things. He was taking them to task in Isaiah there. But let's go to Zechariah chapter 7. So to get to Zechariah, you start in Matthew and you go back like 2 books. This Bible is really small, so you can miss smaller books really easily. So I'm reminding myself of that. Zechariah 7 and verse 5. Say to all the people, we'll start in verse 4. Then the word of Yahweh of hosts came to me saying, say to all the people of the land and to the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th months during those 70 years, did you really fast for me? For me. When you eat, when you drink, do you not eat and drink for yourselves? The question I guess I have is, were they seeking a physical thing? Were they looking for something? The implication is here that they weren't fasting for him. They were fasting for something else, either to be seen or because they were trying to get God to conform to their will. So we can fast for fasting's sake. Right? Just like that, we can go through the rigors and the, practices of the Christian walk just for their own sake. If fasting is a microcosm for the Christian walk, we can have religious practices, we can have religious looking things that we do, but if they're not, just to service of the Lord, to get nearer to God, to serve Him, to be in relationship with Him, to walk out our calling, to be blessings to others, then what is it for? Is it not that were we really doing it for God? Just like he asked these people in Zechariah, were you really doing it for me? Are we seeking God to seek him for who he is and then allowing our requests to flow from there? In Joel 2, verse 12. The Lord says, now therefore, says Yahweh, turn to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, with mourning. So rend your heart and not your garments. Return to Yahweh your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and he relents from doing harm. Who knows if he will turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? God's saying here, again, he's saying, will you not come to me brokenhearted instead of just with broken garments? This is like the theme. So I think it's common to man to want to do it this way. If we're going to fast, we're going to find the wrong way by default to do it. And he says, will you please come to me with a contrite heart and nothing of show, nothing of religiosity. He's asking for our hearts and a rended, torn open heart that he can do something with. So what does God want when we fast? He doesn't want starvation or mourning for mourning's sake. He wants us to be humble before him. He wants our hearts. So fasting is the practice of denying ourselves at its most basic, our most basic human need. What's that? Our most basic need on the pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food and water, right? I think that's at the bottom. I think about that shelter or clothing or something like that. So we need more than anything else, the base thing that humans need, food and water. We're taking the most basic thing that we desire and crave, and we're suppressing it. Fasting, in that sense, fasting is a very visceral thing. We are taking something that we have to do, we desire to do, we want to do, we're in habits of doing, and we're saying, no, I'm going to put those on pause intentionally and purposefully in order to draw near to God so that these fruits might flow out of me and that I may call on him and he may hear me. Why? And not so that we can ask amiss, like the book of James says. He says, you ask, God does not answer because you ask amiss, but so that we will be so aligned to his will that what we ask will be within his will. Jeremiah 29:11. I think we read earlier. Where were we? Where did we leave off? Oh no, we were in Isaiah. So Jeremiah 29 and verse 11. I'll talk a little bit just about the mechanisms of a fast. Isaiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts. Now this is the Jeremiah's letter to the captives, and we'll just read it. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says Yahweh, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you'll call on me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all of your heart. This is not speaking specifically of a fast, but it's speaking of the heart that God wants. And when we align our hearts and deny ourselves and are aligned to his will in a place where the Spirit of God can work with us, then we know what to ask for. And we'll be better able to understand God's leading because we have the opportunity to be more aligned and in parity with him. Acts 13:2 says, as they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, now separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I called them. How did they know this? Except that they were in fasting and prayer. The will of God became apparent while they were in the middle of this fast, right? How would they have known that on the surface, we'd be like, oh no, we shouldn't split these people, or we shouldn't pull them apart, or how would we know to pull these people apart? Save for the fasting, right? It became that the Spirit acted to deliver God's will when they were fasting. Just an example. I want to change gears just a little bit and continue on this mechanism of a fast. But to do that, we have to go to Leviticus 3. So some of you may remember this point when we talked about fasting last time. But for those of you who haven't heard it, I think this is just I think you may be able to see fasting from a little bit different perspective when we talk about it this way. Leviticus 3 and verse 9. We're going to talk about the peace offering. Then he shall offer from the sacrifice of the peace offering as an offering made by fire to the Lord. So bear with me because this is a little dry, but there's a point to this, and we'll tie it all up in a bow here in a second. He shall offer from the sacrifice of the peace offering an offering made by fire to Yahweh, its fat, and the whole fat tail, which he shall remove close to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys, he shall remove. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And if his offering is a goat, then he shall offer it before the Lord. He shall lay its hand on its head, and kill it before the tabernacle of meeting. And the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood all around on the altar. And he shall offer from it his offering is an offering made by fire to Yahweh, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys he shall remove. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, as offering made by fire for a sweet aroma. And this is interesting. All the fat is the Lord's. Have you guys, you know the term the fat of the land? We've heard that term before, right? It essentially means the best things. If you have the fat of the land, you have the oil, you have the honey, you have the milk, the things that livestock and plants are able to give you whenever there's fertility and abundance and water and all the things when everything's just going just right and everything's humming in the little Earth's biosphere, the fat of the land is the ample produce that we have. And if you've ever had a barbecue and you smell what's so delicious, man, the fat drips out of the meat. It renders when it gets hot and it drips on the coals and then evaporates back up as flavor. And it smells so good. That's what you're smelling so much of the time is that fat burning up and coming up as a sweet aroma. The fat of the sacrifices is mentioned over 40 times just in Exodus through Deuteronomy. So it's really important to God. The body, as you know, we have fat. Some of us have more than others. No surprise there. I've been working on my own stash, to be honest. But the body, when you eat, the body convert what you take in to either fat stores or to it says can either convert fat stores to energy or can convert sugar stores. So when you take in food, it can take what you take what you eat, and it'll take the sugars and burn those off. Or if you have excess for what your caloric needs are, it'll stow away and convert that into fat. And there, your fat will stay because sugar is much easier and quicker for your body to digest, okay? And it's always there unless you fast. And when you fast, something happens. In about 1 or 2 days, the sugars, which is in the form of glycogen, begin to get all used up, and they're gone. And so your body enters this state of what's called ketosis. If you've done or ever studied intermittent fasting for weight loss, you've come across this word ketosis. You have no more of the sugars left, so your body begins to use the fat from your body and convert it to energy. When you fast, the fat from your body essentially comes up as an offering to the Lord. Have you ever considered that? Your body is consuming and literally burning up the fat, the good things of the land. In fact, we have so much abundance that our bodies go and turn it into fat, right? You can't get super duper fat when you're starving. That you can look around the world and see people who are not well fed. And like one comedian once said, it's like, how'd that man manage, how did he manage to get fat? That's impressive because we don't have enough food. So the fat in our bodies represents the richness of the land in a sense. When we fast, that comes up to the Lord. We become the sweet-smelling aroma to the Lord. There's a part of you that is the sacrifice when we abstain from food and we go into that ketosis. So I hope that adds a dimension to this particular scripture here in Romans 12 when it says, I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. There's never a good time to fast. It's going to break it to you. There's never a good time. You just have to do it. I actually, one time I was like feeling like I had this pressing like from the Lord that I needed to fast on behalf of somebody. And I was like, no, I was about to go into my daily prayer time or whatever, and I was like, man, I feel like I really need to fast on behalf of this person. And I was coming up with every excuse in my mind as to why we don't really need to do that today. I was like, I'll do it Tuesday, or I'll do it the next day. I was like, but not today. And it was interesting because when I went into that prayer, and I was like, I'm not going to fast today. And I came out of that prayer thinking, not only am I going to fast today, but I'm also going to fast on some other item in my life for as long as it takes for this person until things are resolved. So first advice is if you're really like feeling led like you need to fast, let it be known that's probably the Spirit pushing you to say you need to fast. You need to seek the Lord. Second, if you're feeling like that resistance, well, take it to God. Go to prayer about it. Like it'll change your heart. Like I didn't want to fast, and I came out saying not only going to fast, I'm gonna lay aside this other item for like 2 weeks up to a year. That's what was laid on my heart. Is like I will lay it down up to a year until things are resolved, which was not my intent, right? It was what I was willing to do, but I did not go into the prayer thinking that way. Just know that there is no perfect time to begin a fast. There's no perfect time to be baptized. If we're going to liken fasting along with the beginning of our Christian walk, just go into it. We want to go into it knowing what we're doing and responsibly, of course. But if you wait till everything's perfect and everything's just so, you're probably not going to do it. When we consider also that our time, just like our finances, just like anything else, when we come to the realization that time does not belong to us like we think it does. It's been granted to us from God. He's given it to us that we might use it to His glory and to honor Him. Then we can maybe come up with a little bit easier way to say, okay, I'm going to break off some time for the Lord in fasting. Do it even though you have to go to work. Do it even though you have to go do these things. Yes, it's great if you can take a day off to just completely focus on God, but don't let that be the thing that prevents you from seeking His face and drawing near to Him through fasting. Hosea 6:6 says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. So while we use fasting to essentially offer up our own flesh as a burnt offering to God, more than that, our life is to be a fast. Our life is to be a sacrifice to Him. A literal sacrifice of doing what we wanted to do, taking that, laying it down, and allowing God to do His will with us, to draw near to Him. One more thing I want to point out. I thought this was in my notes, but it's not. I'm reading a book right now called Habits. And within there, they run experiments. And it details these experiments that they've done at the scientific level or whatever. The question is, does each person have willpower in different amounts? And if so, why? And what they found through a series of experimentation is that willpower can be expended. And you can use it up. So you have, imagine each of us has a little tank in us with willpower. Willpower can be used, and it takes a while for that tank to fill back up. Willpower is also like a muscle. You can grow it. It's not just so finite that you can use it up, but it can also be grown. Fasting, in essence, is a growing of that willpower. It allows for the willpower to be able to step up and say no to the things we want. The things that our flesh is asking of us. No to the sin that eats at us, the sin. Each of us has sins that we are, maybe predetermined to want to go towards. Maybe not predetermined, that's not the right word. But to incline towards. And it's the being able to tell no to that food and developing that willpower muscle that enables us to also say no to that. Because I've tasted something better. I've tasted the Lord and found out and seen that He is good. Isaiah 58:11 in conclusion. Isaiah 58:11 again. The Lord Yahweh will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought. Strengthen your bones, and you shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundation of many generations and shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. Our life's to be a fast and a sacrifice to Him. Let's do the same thing He does, asks us to do as we go through the holy days to reenact those. Let our life be reenacted. The model of our Christian walk through fasting with Him. It will draw us nearer to Him in a concentrated fashion. And as I promised at the beginning, it will draw you nearer to God when we do it for all the proper reasons. So I hope that gives everyone the motivation, the desire to run out of here and be like, forget the potluck. We're going to go fast, right? I'm not saying we have to do it today, but let's consider that in our walks in the next week, next month. Let's find a time. Even if we can't find a time because of work and demands, let's find a time. Let's press in and seek God's face because there's no better place to be. So let's worship Him now.